Here we go. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again for another OpenShift Commons community meeting. I'm Karina Angel, and today we have a great topic. It's another one of those hidden topics that, we talk a lot about, but, the community, we don't share it enough in the community. So we're going to talk about validated patterns today, and we have Anthony, Herr, William Henry, and Jonny Rickard with us. Jonny is finishing up the live stream, the AMA, Ask an OpenShift admin office hours. Anyway, that is a great live stream too, if you catch that one. But he will be joining us in a bit. And, I think I put the notes into the chat and just a couple quick announcements, reminders that registration is still open for OpenShift Commons gathering in Raleigh on October 18. Reach out if you have questions. There's also the OpenShift Commons gathering at KubeCon Chicago. So please reach out if you have any questions about that one as well as one in Brazil. So if you're joining us today from Brazil, there's one on October 18 as well. The Chicago one is November 6th. And a heads up for everybody, the CFP open for KubeCon Europe, if there aren't enough things to go to right now. So submit your CFPs, submit your abstracts for Paris, because we'd love to see you in Paris as well and join the community there. All right, so we have the announcements out of the way, and our special guests, if you would like to introduce yourselves and go ahead and get started and kick us off.
William, do you want to start?
No, go ahead, Anthony.
Okay. My name's Anthony Herr. I'm the product manager associated with our Validated Patterns initiative. Along with me is William Henry, and please.
Yeah, so I started this initiative with a few others several years ago, and I'm still very much involved in it on a day-to-day level, and very excited with so much of the progress that's been made with this effort to make things easier for people who use OpenShift. So I think you're going to like this. And later we'll have Jonny, but he's a TV rock star, so we work within his schedule as much as possible. Anthony, I'll send it back to you.
We're lucky to have Jonny on the call. He's going to help us with some of the demo and the technical. While we're working through that, waiting for him, William and I will talk through our slides. And this isn't meant for anything beyond just trying to explain what our goals are. And hopefully, if you have any questions as we go through, you can add them in the chat. You can raise your hand. We're open to collaboration. This is an open source project. Our framework is built around an expectation that it is open for collaboration, but it is also open as a community. So we have in the Slack messaging center, we have a validated pattern community, or at least a folder that we can communicate with. And part of the reason why we're here today is just to let you know about this effort, the initiative, the goals of it, and what you can expect to get out of using it and contributing to it. So this is essentially a GitOps-based framework. We have processes in place that allow for you to have a consistent deployment. We maintain these over time. These examples are all expected to be more business value focused. So instead of looking at just a single product, we're attempting to put something together to make it easy for anyone to create a demo or a use case of a set of products and deploy them using GitOps. The tagline POC to production is because this was built out of an effort around our edge computing strategy. And in working with edge, you expect to have tens to hundreds to thousands of external sites or tens of thousands of external nodes. In order to do that, you need a consistent way to deploy those nodes and the workloads on top of them. So rather than taking the strict, we'll just use the installer to deploy things, we wanted to create these use cases as a way to not only represent what customers and partners, I mean, the field in general is trying to deploy to represent that business value, but also as a way that we can ensure that these use cases are running over time and continue to work. A story I generally tell is when I started at a new company, took their reference architecture, started going through the processes, and after about step 4, things broke. Well, that happens in a lot of the industry just because those reference architectures aren't maintained over time. One of the things we're doing here is after we move a pattern from what we previously called community to validated, we're including it into our CI and testing it against beta bits, as well as including partner products inside of it. So this is a use case that is meant to be the infrastructure for customers, partners, services to build on top of. Kind of taking you through that, I put together a slide that represents the different values, the benefits that we're expecting to see from the different personas. So if you're just looking to do a deployment, it does make it easier in that we represent things through Helm charts. We deploy them in a consistent way, or at least a way that they're intended to be deployed at customer sites. If you're looking to have them tested, the infrastructure is all centered together. So we'll show that in a little bit, that you can find out where this information's at. Actually, I think that there may be something in the chat that shows you where our main product page is, as well as maybe, William, you could put the CI one. I know I have it queued up for you to talk about in a minute.
Yeah, I'll paste it when I talk about it. How about that?
There you go. The goal of this is also not to be static. So when we put together demos and have configurations in a way that satisfy how customers deploy things, we also want to make it modular so that if you want to change a service out, replace it with one of the hundreds of alternatives that are available open source wise, it's really easy to swap out an individual component for another, and you still maintain that entire use case. I don't want to go through all of these just because I'm trying to get to the technical, but also giving you an idea of what the purpose is around this in general. So
yeah.
William, you have something?
Yeah, and when we talk about the business value, what we're talking about here is specific solutions, and we're going to get to that in the next slide or so. So we're trying to focus on like things like edge patterns, AI/ML patterns, DevSecOps patterns, but also vertical sort of things like that. Let's do things in the medical field or in the industrial field or whatever. So the idea is that these patterns are a prescriptive way of deploying a lot of the infrastructure components. And then you can bring your app. We usually have a demo app as part of the pattern, but you can bring your own app and then say, okay, instead of this simple hello world or config demo or whatever pattern, I'm going to change this and put in my pattern instead, or my application instead. Go ahead, Anthony.
Absolutely. To go with that sense, here's our current library of available patterns. Some of them are the tested, the more the community-based, and the bottom ones are maintained, or they have a life cycle. We're in the process of changing our nomenclature to allow for you to understand ones that are tested on every release, and those will include partner products like you see there, Kong Gateway or Cockroach DB. And then there's the ones that we maintain and have that life cycle and are included in our CI. And those are the industrial edge, the medical diagnosis, the Ansible Edge GitOps, and multi-cloud GitOps.
Yeah, there's going to be some more things added and to this coming quarter. And the industrial edge one is going to probably become a little bit more generic in name because we're having a lot of people looking at that, but they're not just looking at it from an industrial factory sort of perspective, but they're looking at it from how do maybe I can deploy this in airports to do for luggage and baggage detection stuff, or maybe I can deploy this at a medical facility as well. So there's some sort of, there can be an overlap there. Okay, and there's also a emerging disease detection one that we're doing as well. Okay, so
Do you want to jump out to the
Yeah,
page?
can you switch over to the page, and I'm going to post if you can go to you're sharing, so if you can go there,
Yep.
that'd be great.
No, I'm just before making sure I'm sharing the right tab.
Yeah. So this is the landing page. What's really sort of, you can obviously read the landing page, go through that little video, but what's really more important is if you hit the patterns tab up on the top, this shows you the sort of documented and available patterns right now that are completed either in the validated or community section. There are other ongoing patterns up on GitHub, and I posted the GitHub link as well there. But these are the ones that we're monitoring that have been finished. And then after being finished, they either are validated or they're community. And if you want to explain that a little bit more, and let me explain it. The validated involves two things. We have to prove that the people who have submitted those patterns have to kind of say, look, this pattern is live. It's actually in customer sites. Maybe not exactly like this, but the overall architecture and pattern is in there. And secondly, we're doing CI on it. So hit the status page there, Anthony. And I think, are people raising their hands or? No, they're just joining. Good. So in the status page, this shows you that we are tracking these. We have a QE team that is daily running tests on these, different, either by dates. We rotate them on a date basis, but then we also do them by pattern. If you want to go down. So we have the different patterns that we're testing. We do it by hypervisor, Amazon, Azure, and Google, and scroll down one more. And we also are doing it on different versions of the commercially available OpenShift product. So 4.10 will probably drop off here in the next week or two because of support reasons for that. 4.10 will not be supported, I think, any longer. And so we try to, what the sort of life cycle for it is as a new a new pattern comes in, we tend to turn around and start that pattern on whatever is the current version of OpenShift, and then we move and keep 3 versions of it going at any one time. Okay, has Jonny joined? Has the Rockstar joined? Jonny, are you available? Johnny's still not here yet.
So while we're waiting, Karina had asked a question. Can anyone contribute? And the answer is yes. We are very open to collaboration. I can start up another page with the GitHub if you'd like. Our GitHub is just /validated patterns, and the repos are here based on what we had talked about previously, the available patterns and what is available to deploy. But anyone can go and modify or submit a pull request to do that modification and contribute and engage with the team. Right now,
Yeah.
the team that we have on the Red Hat side are the main maintainers or primary ones, but we are open to working with anyone from the community that would like to work with us.
Let me qualify that a little bit in the sense that our team, really, the validated patterns engineering team is really focused more on the framework and the way we're doing the GitOps pieces. While we do make changes to individual patterns and we also help people onboard patterns and stuff like that, the idea is that we're not the domain experts on industrial edge, or we're not the superstars on AI/ML or whatever it is. So we prefer that someone in our field organization or some other contributor that's bringing a pattern in, that they kind of should sort of own that repo for that particular pattern, right? And be the ones who are doing approval and stuff on the updates to the pattern, that particular pattern. But we're sort of maintaining the entire framework. So the framework itself gets improvements all the time to try and make it work. Okay.
Our primary pattern is, or our base pattern, you see it's the public template, is our multi-cloud GitOps. We also have the DevSecOps there it is, multi-cluster DevSecOps. These are the two we see a lot of people deploy as the base for their patterns. So when you go through and you create a new idea, these are almost the foundation to get you going, so you don't have to learn everything to get started. It gives you the example, and you build on top of those.
Yeah, the sort of overall flow of how this works is if there are, if in terms of the infrastructure of your pattern, the pieces, the products that you're using, if there's an operator available for those, we deploy the operator. As many of you know, a lot of the operators don't always install things. They are installers. So then what happens is after the operators, we have Helm charts for the various products or projects that you're using, and those will get applied to help deploy it. And it doesn't just apply it for installing a specific version. Sometimes there's a lot of integration work between components. So for example, let's say you were using a multi-cluster DevSecOps, for example, here. Well, you'll probably deploy one instance of your registry, your main Quay registry, but you may have other clusters that are consuming from that. And so you may be using a Quay bridge. And in order to do that, there needs to be some integration between your cluster that's doing the devel, that's going to be pushing to your registry, and the registry itself. So all of those sort of API and URLs and all that sort of stuff, the pattern tries to build those in. So it comes up fully as a pattern. The products and the operators are installed, the operators are configured, and they're also configured to work together. So things like Kafka and AMQ streams are all set up for your particular application. We have our rock star, Jonny, has just joined. So Jonny, thank you for coming over from your busy television time. We really appreciate you being here. And we're going to hand it over to Jonny, who's going to walk us through the medical diagnosis pattern.
Are you all set up, Jonny, to set your demo?
I'm going to try. I'm actually having network issues right now, so but I should be able to show at least some of the pod syncing. Like for whatever reason, I can't connect to my I don't know what's going on with my network. This is just like, it's just being bananas right now.
So why don't we hit the slides really quickly first and walk through them?
Yeah. So one of the first patterns that I worked on when I came to the team, by the way, I'm Jonny Rickland. I'm on the validated patterns team. I'm just a lackey on the team. So just normal guy doing regular stuff with these guys. Like these are all the superstars. I just kind of get to hang out with them. So, but no, so one of the first patterns that I worked on when I came to the team is this medical diagnosis. And what this was, it was a demo that was put together for the VA, right? And so what they wanted to do is they wanted to take X-rays of people and run them through some type of AI/ML pipeline to make a determination whether or not that person had pneumonia or not. So trying to not necessarily take anybody's role away or anything like that, but to help enable doctors and medical professionals to getting to a decision faster, so that way they can apply the appropriate treatment. So in the way that this is working is you'd have a medical facility. It would take an X-ray. That X-ray would get dumped into an S3 bucket. And then the S3 bucket would notify a topic for Kafka. But what's going on is in our pattern, because we don't have an X-ray machine at our disposal, unfortunately, we're actually kind of we're mimicking this workflow. And so what's going on is our medical facility is really an actual S3 bucket, and we have an application that will go out and it'll pull the image from the bucket, and then pull the image from S3 and put it into an object store bucket that lives in the cluster. And then that data pipeline will start just as if we had that medical facility taking the picture and uploading it to S3 on its own. So after the notification happens to the Kafka producer, it runs through an AI/ML trained model called risk assessment. And so that model does a predictability analysis off of the image. And so it makes a determination whether or not the person in the image has pneumonia with a high probability, or it's unsure that maybe it can't read the image correctly, or it can't make a concrete decision based off of the image, or it makes the determination that the person does not have pneumonia. And then once it goes through that AI ML pipeline, one of the last steps is it will anonymize the image. So right now, when the image comes through, it's got Jonny Rickard, maybe my date of birth, maybe my social security number, some PI that I don't want getting out. And so in the sense of reusability, what it does is it strips out all of that personal information and it anonymizes it and then distributes it back so that way the model can continue to be trained and continue to be updated. And I kind of jumped around a little bit here because I'm rushing, but there's a lot of technology in this model or in this pipeline. So at the core, we have OpenShift and OpenShift GitOps for the GitOps framework. We have ODF for the cloud native storage. We also have OpenShift serverless, which gives us the Knative serving and Knative eventing function capability. And then, yeah, I think that's it actually. Yeah, so, and then we also have secrets management, right? So we have, right now we're using Vault in a combination of external secrets operator for the secrets abstraction to Kubernetes from the Vault itself. And what that does is that allows us to have this reusable pattern that anybody can use. And if you think about the different, maybe it's not pneumonia that you're trying to detect in an object, right? Maybe it's a nefarious object going through a scanner at an airport, or maybe a scanner at a post office or something like that, right? So imagine you're taking a picture of something and you need to put it through a pipeline and you're trying to detect a thing within that image and you want that output to be automated. That's really where this comes from, right? The X-ray is just an example of how you can use it in one industry.
And just on that, the important thing here is those applications and those models are very specific, and that's where the real value is for many end customers who are using this. And all this other infrastructure piece is just a necessary evil. How, deploying all the different pieces and the Knative and all that and hooking up S3. And so we want to take all that out of it, or as much of that out of it as possible, so that you can deploy the pattern and your data scientists and others can focus more on the models and the applications and stuff like that.
The one more thing I wanted to add is that this is the architecture we have inside the pattern, but included in that is what Jonny had defined, and that's included in the demo, which is also a Grafana dashboard showing the process going from one step to the other, having each one of the X-rays or simulated X-rays listed through and taking each one of the step, showing you the diagnosis, going through the anonymization process. You see all that, but that demo is just to illustrate the possibilities or how it was defined initially, and is used in our CI testing to ensure that all these APIs are exercised from the beginning to the end. So we're not just doing the installation testing, we're also checking to make sure that these APIs are connecting the way they're supposed to, and find issues that would prevent you from running this the way it's supposed to be run in your environments. So that's all I wanted to say. Jonny, do you want to bring up the demo and how this is deployed, or showing that demo?
Yeah, I'll show you from the OpenShift perspective. For some reason, like I said, my network is being crazy right now, and I keep watching my API server drop. So I'll share my screen and just kind of run through what gets deployed.
I'll stop presenting for you.
Right.
And Michael has posted a YouTube video of this particular demo. Is that right, Michael?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna let this. We'll see how long this lasts. I've been watching my interface drop in and out since I've been online here. So hopefully it lasts. But the idea here is we start with a brand new cluster, and when we're using a combination of yeah, see, this is because my network was going down. So we're using a combination of Helm and OpenShift GitOps. So we use the Helm templating functions to create some of these objects. If you're familiar with the operator framework, you create the operator and that gives you access to the API, but you still have to create an instance. So what our pattern does is it puts all the glue together between that operator's API and our instance, and the instance of that operator in our cluster. So the reason why this looks terrible for this demo, but I'm using hosted control plane, and my API server was bouncing as these things were deploying. And so that's why they're coming up as failed. But like in a normal situation, these would actually all be green. So again, all of these, like our cluster was empty. And so we run a make install from the beginning. And then that make install calls on some additional values files that describe what our cluster is supposed to look like. And so with this pattern, we're deploying OpenShift serverless, OpenShift GitOps, ODF. ODF deploys a bunch of other operators like Nuba. And then we also use AMQ streams, which is Kappa, and the Grafana operator for the dashboard. But because this thing's broke, because I'm having a hard time with my, if you've been on any call with me in the last like 3 weeks, you know that my home network is it's complete garbage right now for some reason. So what this is going to do, if this is working correctly, unfortunately, it would deploy all of these resources, and then we would be able to go over to our developer context. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. And then just look at our topology, and then go over to X-Ray Lab. And so again, just imagine that we started with nothing, and then with the simple make install, it starts deploying all of these resources in order. And so it's going through and it's deploying a resource, it's making sure that it's there, it's deploying Vault, making sure that the Vault is configured correctly. We're configuring external secrets, and that external secret resource is creating the actual Kubernetes resource that the deployment uses, or that the pod within the deployment uses. And then eventually what would happen is all of this would pop up into a dashboard that we'd be able to browse to. But because this thing died right in the middle, it's just—
Hey, Johnny.
Yes.
One of the important things is you showed in the console there the validated patterns operator, which is a community operator that essentially what it does is you give it it knows where the repository for the medical diagnosis is, and it right there, and it loads that plus the whatever branch of that you wanted. So you could, if you were doing changes, you might have a branch that you're doing the changes on, and you deploy from there. But it deploys that, and then it turns around and uses Argo CD to deploy the rest of the pattern. So it basically hands over control to Argo CD. It says, hey, Argo, here's the repo, here's the branch, go do your thing. And so then GitOps kicks in.
Yep, absolutely. And so we can see that we're using the pattern medical diagnosis. Some of the cool things that I think that I hope that we do a better job of, I hope we're doing a good job of emphasizing, is that, like, if you're used to using Helm, or if you're used to trying to do lookups and stuff like that with some of these tools, it's not exactly easy. So what we do is we actually go through and we grab a bunch of this information during the initialization. So like we get the apps domain, we grab the cluster domain, we get like the cluster ID is already there, but we get the cluster name and the platform and stuff like that. And the reason why we do that is because instead of having to define the cluster name and try and call it over and over again, we just go and grab it once, and then that's a reusable value that we can use throughout the pattern. And so it's just a something that should be easy that we've made actually easy for you. And really, it's in the sense of you don't even have to worry about it. Like, you just run make install, or you deploy the pattern, and the pattern will pull all that stuff out for you. But this is to what William was just talking about, where we have our repo, my branch name, and then if I had any overrides, I could add them here. We also have a charts repo that we're moving over to eventually. So that'll give us some of this multi-source capability, where we have our chart repository, and then in another repository we'll have like specific values that you can use to override specific things.
What's really, really cool about this is the more we're doing these patterns, the more we're seeing very repeatable way of doing things, specifically in the AI ML world. That whole idea of the workflow of deploying models out to edge pieces or near edge pieces. Those models being able to run out there, get deployed in the right way, but also the infrastructure pieces that send data back to the a sort of a hub or development cluster where the data scientists can improve the model and then push it back up into a pipeline that rebuilds the model and redeploys it out. So we're seeing that loop, and there's a lot of infrastructure pieces that go into doing that, and some of them we're seeing a very common pattern for how to manage that.
So what we're doing, just so you guys get under like hopefully a clear view of where all this stuff is coming from. So within the medical diagnosis pattern, under the data center key, we're defining the cloud provider. We're defining a storage class name if we needed to override this, what region we're coming from, and then the cluster name and domain. Now, that's only medical diagnosis. This is actually getting called. So these parameters here actually need to be. I don't want to say they're deprecated, but deprecated within the values file because we're not overriding them anymore. And these were kind of put in after we had done added the lookup capability. But for X-ray, for medical diagnosis, we come in and we describe these in the values global, and then just to give you an idea of what it looks like in the values hub, this is where the magic happens, right? This is where we're telling OpenShift GitOps, this is what I want my cluster to look like, and this is what we want. So you can see pump the brakes, kid. We're declaring namespaces. So we're saying, Argo, please go out and create all of these namespaces. And then the subscriptions are for the operators that we want deployed onto that cluster. And if the operator itself requires an operator group, right? So maybe it gets deployed outside of OpenShift operators, then the operator group will automatically get created with the subscription. And so that's all of your operator deployment stuff right there. And then projects are the Argo CD resource, right? So that's the Argo container for keeping objects together, keeping resources together within the OpenShift GitOps platform. And then here's where we're defining our applications. So within the applications, we're saying what applications do we want deployed, what namespace should it go to, what projects, so which Argo project, and then where within the repository does that Helm chart live. And so this is a local path within the Git repo. So we're really saying, hey, look, if you want to deploy the instances of ODF, then go find them in charts/all/open data or OpenShift data foundations. And so if you're familiar with Argo CD or OpenShift GitOps, there's really two types of applications. You have a Git-based application, and then you have a Helm-based application. And we support both. Just like we prefer Helm, and we lean to Helm on most of our applications, but we also support customized. So if you have an application that's customized, it works within the framework. We just prefer Helm because the really, really awesome templating functions.
Yeah, particularly when you're doing hybrid cloud and you want to be swapping in and changing domains or cloud platforms, all that good stuff.
Yep. So again, this is where we just describe what we want our cluster to look like. We just detail out the application information. And then if this was working great, if this was working correctly, you'd be able to do an OC Git apps and see that all of these were synced and healthy. But because something happened in the middle of the deployment with my network and my hosted control plane server, it's just kind of it's all jacked up right now. So I apologize for a really terrible demo. But this is what
we
it would
see
look
the
like.
Argo CD tiles.
That's the problem, is it won't let me get to Argo.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This was all like as I was logging into the stream. This was all working, and then it was like, nope, I'm done. So there's something going on with my my hosted cluster.
Okay. Well, so I'm wondering, I mean, we can point them to the demos that you have also already created, but some of the other patterns that you all have been working on. I know there's some edge ones, you have more AI/ML ones. I'm wondering if you can walk through some of them and show other ones that the community might be interested in. Is anybody on the call right now, if you want to speak up on, a pattern that might be interesting while somebody starts sharing their screen with a new pattern.
William, you're going through the industrial edge one that we had done initially based on Manuela. I don't know if we just want to talk about architecture and what's
so one of the things, the industrial edge one, we've been asking about what what happens with that in the next phase. And we've decided we're going to be moving that to an edge anomaly detection pattern, which will still use the industrial edge factory type example, but we're going to try to componentize it as well so that you could swap in other pieces. And that covers the whole sort of pipeline part. I have a cluster. I'm just after trying to restart it because you can imagine, everyone, we use a lot of cloud resources to do this. And we have what we call 6 o'clock. We get 6 o'clock unless you are working on stuff at night. We have a job that puts all of our clusters to sleep, so you can come back in and start them in the morning, so they're not running overnight doing nothing. And I am just about to bring up one of my. Oh, it's on its way up now. Of course, I need to figure out what the.
Thanks for sharing the logical diagrams, Karina. Most of this information was built in collaboration with our portfolio architecture team and putting together draw IO diagrams and architecture diagrams so that this is consistent across Red Hat. So this is one of the requirements that we have before things turn into validated patterns, things that we maintain over time, is that these aren't just science projects that we've thought up and have put out there to focus on one feature. They have to be based on a customer deployment. And because of that, you'll see these architecture diagrams that are precise with specific use cases and technologies included in them. As much as they're modular and you can swap one service out for another, they were built at or for a customer and a specific use case. This one was based on the upstream Manuela use case.
So I am going to share my screen really quick. If I can do that, hold on. So one of the other ones I'm working on right now is what we're calling emerging disease detection. And what that is it's not unlike the medical diagnosis that you saw today, but instead of looking at images, we are looking at data. And so the example was looking at sepsis data. This one is very much event-driven. So I have never run this thing before because I'm literally trying to bring it in to the. But here's the Argo CD. So these things are all defined in the values files for this, just like Jonny was showing you earlier. If I do a pull or push to this branch that I'm on, which is the secrets branch, it will turn around and update the whole pattern for me. If I go here, I have never done this, so let's have a look. Where is it? Not workloads, networking, routes. This is very much sepsis demo. Let's see if we have a. Not that one. There it is, the sepsis UI. Maybe this one works. Oh my gosh. If this goes well. It's not ready. Probably the route. But the point is that this one is a real time. It gets data, not images. And it's looking at the model, analyzes the data, and then turns around and tells a doctor, "Hey, I've seen sepsis in the data based on this person's results from their lab." So it gets lab results. So it's the same. Again, it's another machine learning or AI-based model. It's just it's deployed at the. It's not using images; it's using data instead. But the model looks very the same. It's using Knative to run the serverless application. So every time the data comes in, it says, "Oh, wake up," and do an analysis of it, and it sends that to the sepsis detection user interface for the doctor to say, "Hey, this data came in for this patient, and they have sepsis or they don't have sepsis," etc. But a lot of the stuff, as you see, Kafka again is very much important in this. The external secrets for managing the pulling secrets data for various aspects, passwords that we don't want to load into GitOps, into GitHub. All of those things are we also have single sign-on for the demo as well. So those components are all configured automatically for you, so you can focus on your, in this case, it was sepsis detection, but maybe it's some other detection that you're doing instead of sepsis. Has that been helpful? I'm going to just shut up now. Go back to Jonny.
That has been helpful. On the follow-up, I'll send out the demos for people to watch in async.
Yeah, this sepsis demo is literally going to be our sort of next one deployed. So I'm still working on it with the person in the field who's been, this again is another one that's been deployed at the Veteran Affairs, the VA. And so it's going to be a validated pattern once we get it finished and put in and documented. Oh, that's another good point. I do want to say that all of these patterns, when you go into them, you can turn around and see, let's see, the one that Jonny was talking about, medical diagnosis. It tells you about the pattern. It shows you the different components in the architecture that are deployed. So these are showing you the different networks that are being talked across between the different components, so we can have different network isolation between things. And then this shows you the sort of data. So we're worked with the what we call the portfolio architecture team and their tool to write these. And then it has a recorded demo, and it tells you how to get started with it. It tells you about the cluster sizing for various different types of clouds, tells you about troubleshooting, and there's also often a page called Ideas for Customization. Hey, this is the medical diagnosis, but what could we do with it to make it better? So there's a lot of information we put in here for the patterns, not just the validated ones, but the community ones as well.
There's a question, William.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, where do I see the questions? I have to go back here.
David, do you have a question? I'm sorry.
I do. The scribe has a question.
Please, go ahead.
I laughed too over there. I know I was a little late this morning because I got pulled off on a different call or different things. On these patterns, is this more of a one-click setup and install, or is this something that has to be you have to kind of build it out? The second question is, where are these? These are AWS patterns, or can I put them on like a bare metal application or something of that nature? Because I'm looking at this going, this is pretty cool. I wish I could do something like this.
So
I wasn't cool like you guys, but especially from a medical standpoint.
I'll answer first, but I think Jonny will want to jump in too as well. So these are sort of one click, bring it all up for now. But what the pattern that we would say for consumers of these or users is create a fork of the pattern, and then you can clone it. You can create a new branch on that pattern, make all the changes you want, push them up to your Git repo, then deploy the pattern on that branch, and watch it and go, oh, this is great, it's working, but I need to change this and need to change. So then you evolve it. It's all GitOps-based. So every time you push some changes to your Git repository, you're updating it. So it's a very good starting point for you to do the one click, get up and going, and then start making changes and modifications to it as you go by in time and tailor it for yourself. And then you have that Git repo. Now you can always turn around and say, I need to sync with the upstream again on my fork, because I've heard they've done some new stuff for a new version of OpenShift or whatever it is, and you can get that pulled down. The second part of your question was, what was the second part again?
AWS only.
Oh yeah, no, it's OpenShift based. So wherever your OpenShift is running, we've tested this, as we said, on various of our own self-deployed OpenShift on 3 different clouds. We do the CI on those 3 different clouds, but we've also tested it with things like managed services like Rosa and Arrow. And there has been some testing of this on IBM Cloud. In terms of bare metal, if you deploy the OpenShift cluster on, we haven't done any testing on it, but because it's OpenShift, it should just work. You may have some tweaking around specific storage if you're using OpenShift Data Foundation or stuff like that. So we tend to have to provide special tags for different storage options on AWS versus GCP versus Azure versus IBM Cloud, etc. But they will run. The plan is bring your OpenShift, and this should be deployable on it.
So technically, you can run the like you said, you can run this on like a bare metal type scenario. And okay, answer me this question. To follow on this, how big of a bare metal solution or system are we looking at putting this on? Does that make sense? Do I have to put a database, or not a database, but a data center in here, or can I go that onto like a laptop-ish desktop type solution?
Jonny.
So for multi-cloud GitOps, which is our entry point pattern. So that's really where, if you're coming in with an idea, that's really where we recommend you start. So for multi-cloud GitOps, we've tested it by running it in, let me see if I can get the new name right, OpenShift Local, which is like the desktop version of OpenShift that goes on your laptop, right? Okay. So like it'll fit there. Now that's coming from somebody that's got a pretty beefy MacBook, so it's got like 64 gigs of RAM and stuff like that. So multi-cloud GitOps doesn't need that much, but obviously, like if you're deploying something like that, it's going to deploy OpenShift. You already have OpenShift running, but it's going to deploy ACM. It's going to deploy Vault as well as OpenShift GitOps, right? So there is some resource that's going to be used. Now, medical diagnosis and even like industrial edge, those are huge patterns. And the reason why is because we take all of those products that came with that pattern or with that application deployment, and we really just we dump it into compute and control plane nodes. We don't really separate out into like infrastructure nodes or anything like that. So we have things like ODF, serverless, AMQ streams, all that stuff is running on all of your worker nodes. Now, if you split that out, you should probably get your mileage is going to vary in a more positive direction. But just know that like things like medical diagnosis they're gonna need quite a bit, right? I mean, so like for AWS to take an M5.4XL for medical. Industrial edge is I don't think they're nearly as large, but there's more.
Maybe a 2x large in AWS.
Yeah. But one thing I did want to back up about there are some patterns that are AWS specific, and I think it's the Ansible Edge GitOps. And the reason why it's that way is because we deploy a bare metal node within AWS, and then we run VMs on top of that. So that one specifically is AWS specific. And just a segue away from your question on not to get away from your question, but just to segue into another topic about Ansible and the patterns. So one thing that we've in our conversations with a bunch of people across the organization and stuff like that is GitOps just cloud native? And the question or the answer really is no, right? GitOps it's a framework. It's a way of deploying your applications and keeping your applications in sync using Git as the source. And so we've kind of taken that a step further with Ansible. And so we have an Ansible Edge GitOps framework, and we also have an Ansible GitOps framework as well as an Ansible Edge pattern. Which both utilize Ansible and the GitOps framework to deploy resources to cloud and data center based resources.
So Jonny and William, does that mean that if you had Ansible playbooks that you couldn't utilize them in our GitOps framework?
You actually can. There's 2 ways we're looking at sort of Ansible in this. One is you've got an existing sort of cloud native thing right? But you need to, there's some imperative work that you need to do, like Jonny was talking about there. Maybe you have to deploy certain pieces, and that's outside the scope of OpenShift, but Ansible can do it. So the pattern can call out to Ansible as a framework and run that imperative work. The other one is where you might want to just use Ansible itself to control edge pieces. So for example, a good example of this one is some of your edge components can be quite small, right? And so the idea of running Argo CD on those components, it might not be a good idea. So how do I do GitOps out to those edge components that aren't big enough to run something like Snow, single node OpenShift, or a 3-node cluster, or whatever it might be? Well, the answer then could be that we're looking at this. You mentioned it earlier. Somebody, I think it was Anthony, that we're looking at things like a microshift and stuff, and how to use Ansible to do the GitOps part out to those components. So you can be using the overall framework for doing the hub and the data center and the development clusters and all that good stuff on the back end, but Ansible does the piece of the GitOps out to the edge pieces that are smaller. Does that help, David?
Because I'm just, it's, drinking from the fire hose, if you will, Mr. Henry, and understanding, the whole ecosystem of how validated patterns work versus, with OpenShift, and now you threw an Ansible in there, and it's like,
Yeah.
All the Legos.
So the way I would look at it is,
and that type of,
once upon a time, this was called hybrid cloud patterns, and that's a very good sort of description of there's a lot of different ways to be using this technology, and we want to be able to give the way I'd look at it is it's a GitOps approach to a very much a hybrid cloud world, right? And so we want to be able to turn around and drive everything through GitOps, where there's no extra manual, let me look at my manual, what 15 different commands do I need to run now that I've installed this? It's like, no. Let's put that into Helm charts, etc. Let's put it into playbooks in Ansible if we really want to go down the Ansible route for certain pieces. So yeah, you're right. It is drinking from the fire hose, and we continually be drinking from the fire hose each day. But that's why the community is important, and that's why we want people contributing to this, because we want them to bring their expertise to this and turn around and say to us, I looked at the way you're doing Kafka, for example, and all of these patterns. Didn't you know you could do it this way? And it's better. And we'd like, oh my gosh, we'd welcome that sort of feedback, and we'd love that sort of input into the patterns, people improving them all the time.
With the last couple minutes, is there one more question we want to get through? Because we're open to chatting on the Slack channel in the validated pattern section or general, either one of those forums. Our goal is to engage with you all and welcome communication with the community.
And if you're not in Slack, remember, just reach out to me and I'll add you. Or put your name into the document or chat and I'll add you now.
And I'd love to hear any feedback. If there's not questions, is there any other feedback? Like, do people think this is something that they could use or get involved in? Or is this just, hey, that looks like a cool thing that you're doing, but it doesn't apply very much to us? We'd love some feedback.
I was just adding into the notes, but there are no other comments, questions. I know, it's because so much information, have to digest it, right? I mean, even myself, I have to go look through your GitHub and, play with some patterns, and already created a fork, now I can go work on it. Yeah, and we'll have a follow-up session, but and thanks, David.
I need a redemption tour, Karina, for the demo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, Karina and I were talking yesterday as well about potentially, this is an hour session, and you're right, David, there's way more stuff for you to know. We've created sort of training material and stuff around this and sort of labs, and hopefully we can maybe on other OpenShift Commons in person or virtual events, we can sort of do a more hands-on-y approach with people and help people learn a little bit more about them.
There's also a lot of material that we put into the chat and can paste that into the notes if that's not there already. In watching the screen and everyone's screen, I'm not sure what got in there, but we have articles on cloud.redhat.com and demo videos on our webpage, areas that you can learn about Helm or what are validated patterns if this is a replayed thing and you'd like to see Jonny present again. There's also an Ask an OpenShift admin just on validated patterns. So lots of materials to digest if you'd like.
Yeah, David's been doing, and thank you for volunteering. And if anybody would like to volunteer for next time in 2 weeks, we have the lead Microshift engineer is going to be on. So if you don't know Microshift, that's an edge deployment. If one of you want to, give Microshift a shout out, since Jonny, you were nodding your head.
Oh, I was wondering, yeah, is it Ricardo or?
In 2 weeks, it will be.
Yeah,
But
he's
you're welcome
awesome.
to come back.
Oh yeah, I will. Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, he is. But 2 weeks, we'll see you all. And thank you so much for all the questions, and Anthony, William, and Jonny being here talking about validated patterns. But we are at time, and we will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Stop the recording.